Hey, this is Salina. I'm specifically making this video for Amy Tompkins, who asked for it, but anyone who might need it. I'm doing a little synopsis and sharing my notes from Monogenetics session 2. Okay, so Kirby first of all talked a little bit about biohacking and how he considers himself more of a biohacker. So what I know of that, since I was doing that before there was a name for it, is that we're going to take with discernment, any new or ancient practice that we can find to help build the strength and longevity and endurance in the body that we can find. So that will include things modern and high-tech, which may be chemical. Of course, this is with discernment and research, not just haphazardly doing this, but we're really trying to find a way to utilize what the body has to offer, the way God made us, to the best possible outcome. So that also can mean that a biohacker may butt heads with modern science, with ancient science, or modern medicine, ancient medicine, or natural path medicine types. So that's what I understood Kirby saying, and having been doing this for so long, that's what I sort of was understanding. Always with wisdom and discernment, always for the best possible outcome. Kirby's probably more extreme than I am, but that's what I understood him to be describing, which I relate to on some extent. So the main thing was breath work. Kirby shared with us 5, technically 6, styles of breathing or breath work practices. So the first one was just a relaxed breathing, but he expanded upon that with some holding of the breath. And then he went into box breathing, where you breathe the same amount of time. Inhale, hold, exhale, hold, and repeat. That's like a box, right? Every side is the same. Each component is the same. And then he also shared with us another style called Wim Hof, which you can look up online, W-I-M Hof. Wim Hof style of breathing, where you're hyper-oxygenating the body. And I practiced that as well. And then he shared with us Buteyko breathing, which is spelled B-U-T-E-Y-K-O. Breathing, there's an institute. It was actually developed in the 50s. And Wim Hof is actually a takeoff of some much older practices of breathing, but he's made it really famous and amazing. It also involves cold. But Buteyko breathing, sorry, I may have been confusing. There's regular breathing, there is box breathing, there's Wim Hof, which is oxygenating the body, hyperoxygenating it, and utilizing cold air and cold water, where you're taking your panic breath that he talked about, your big breath in, and not maybe fully exhaling before you get into the cold, and then you continue to breathe. But Buteyko breathing, B-U-T-E-Y-K-O, developed by, I think, a Ukrainian doctor in the 1950s. It's shallow breaths. It does away with the deep, big, giant breathing, where you're taking a huge inhale. You're basically stopping the big breathing, and it has a series of exercises, about 7. I've done a little bit of this, but the technique focuses on controlled pausing of the breath, and it builds to create an air hunger, and it culminates with these exercises that Kirby shared with us, where we're doing many breaths with pauses. So it's a much shallower breathing. It becomes very relaxed, and you're training yourself to need to take more shallow but more cohesive breaths. So it's a very, if you look at it on an electromagnetic sort of a chart, it's a very peaceful kind of breathing. It's really helpful with anxiety. It's very helpful with sleep apnea. That's the big draw. Then he mentioned Swara breathing, which is from Swara Yoga. Swara is a word, I believe, that means sound in Sanskrit, and it really has to do with closing off nostrils specifically. There's a lot to it. It's slightly complicated, but you have to practice each step to move further efficiently and effectively. But it is, it's specifically developed to aid people with their cosmic consciousness, from a friend of mine I know who practices this regularly. And then he spoke, so those were the 4, and reverse breathing. And so reverse breathing is, I like the way Kirby describes it. I teach it to people differently than he describes it. But, and then the other breath that he talked about that we're not doing right now is chi breathing. The Wim Hof, the Swara breathing, the Buteyko breathing, and the box breathing, those are the main ones he's talking about for that he uses for his 530s. And I have questions about the 530s, so hopefully he'll answer us on that. But my quick answer, my quick understanding is that he takes one of those 5 or 6 breath styles and uses them in a series, like, you know, it's kind of like doing a workout. And he would take the last one in the out of the 5 would be the reverse breathing. But in the first style or breathwork style, he would do 5 30 times, or is he going to do one style 30 times and then a long hold until you feel that panicky, I have to breathe. And then you do another style of breathing, either 5 30 times, that same style, or one style 30 times. This is where I'm confused. And then another long hold until you feel a panicky need to, I must breathe. And then the last style of breathing or breathwork technique he would use is reverse breathing, where he would do it 5 sessions of that 30 times, or one session 30 times. I'm pretty sure it's 5. And then he would do the last 2. Well, anyway, he added some things that I still have questions about. He mentioned the last 2 breath styles would be some sort of compression breathing, whereas the first one would not. And the compression breathing is more like the chi style of breathing, where you're building up energy in the breath physiologically and in the breath energy, which is chi breathing. So the way I would teach, if you're not familiar with reverse breathing, and there's great videos and resources online to teach all of these other ones, although Swara you kind of need a mentor to do. Reverse breathing, which is a good step to lead to chi breathing, I believe. When you think of yogic breathing or Pilates breathing, where you're using your diaphragmatic breath, when you think of the air coming in through the nose, pushing down, filling the lungs and pushing down on the diaphragm, which is under the lowest rib, and flattening it out, it will automatically push the organs forward. Or if you hold your tummy really tight, it'll push your organs outward, so away from the spine. In Pilates, we call that a posterior lateral breath, which people like dancers have to use, because they have to stay very tight in the abs and in the pelvic floor to hold their center so they can dance well, but they have to breathe really well. So when I teach the reverse breathing, first we start with the diaphragmatic breath, then the posterior lateral breath. So literally as you breathe in, the diaphragm compresses, the belly goes out and then comes back in. That's for diaphragmatic breathing. And then for posterior lateral breathing, as the air comes in, the diaphragm compresses. You hold the belly and hold the pelvic floor, and the ribs expand with the pushing of the diaphragm down on the organs, but you're very tight. Then to take that into reverse breathing, the first thing I would do is still remember that the breath is coming in through the nose, and the physiology of the breath, or the physical essence of the breath, is pushing down on the diaphragm, while you think of and imagine the energy of the breath pulling upward, holding that pelvic floor tight, holding the belly in, and the energy of the breath, you can almost, I tell people, give it a color or give it some glitter and watch it come up the spinal column into the pineal gland, like the third eye right in the middle of the brain there, and then up through the crown of the head and circle back down. And so reverse breathing, that's how I begin to teach people that. So you're thinking of the energy of the breath versus the physiology or the physical content of the breath pushing down on the diaphragm. Taking that the next, a few steps later, what Kirby was describing was the Qi breathing, where you're actually holding the pelvic floor muscles tight, squeezing them, pulling the belly in towards the spine tight. As the breath comes in, not only the physical breath, but the energy of the breath compresses into right here, right at the bottom of your sternum, the xiphoid process, right under that, right into the solar plexus area. That's your true core. And Jackie talks about that. And yoga talks about that as well. You hold that energy almost like in a ball. It's nice to picture it as a ball. I love how Kirby described it. And then you can direct that energy outward. So like in qigong, in boxing, in martial arts, when you want to have an explosive movement or energy outpour, such as in those sports, or specifically with the Qi breath going into an organ that needs to be healed, in Kirby's case, you let out that air, but it's energy, not just air. So in the more advanced reverse breathing that goes towards the Qi breathing, the air comes in, you're breathing in, and the energy is pulling up the spine. So the two are coming together, creating this force, this energy force that is physical and energetic. So we can, measure air, and we can measure the wavelength of the energy, and directing it outward on purpose. And as you release it, you release it in spurts, rather than all at once. So I'm sure that, that is more advanced. It's not specifically what he was saying we need to learn right now, but you can study a lot of these just through YouTube videos and begin. What I like to tell people is, when you're learning something brand new, your brain is in a very happy place, because we're designed to learn. So like a baby learning to walk, you never yell at the baby because it can't do it the first 5 times. And the baby doesn't usually get mad either. You just keep pushing forward, and it's a happy place of learning. So enjoy the learning. Sometimes what people who haven't been using their diaphragm, what I've experienced is that they may burp or fart or make other sounds, and that's actually fine, because you're reestablishing neuromuscular connections, you're moving the diaphragm, pushing the organs around, and all of that is really, really healthy. So enjoy the process. Post some questions. People on here who know how to do this, I'm sure, will answer if I don't answer. And there's one more thing that I want to add. Kirby said to keep your eyes closed and also use your arms. So another part of qigong. So he mentioned when you fill up your lungs, or when you fill up a bucket or a cup full of water, you fill up from the bottom to the top. So your arms will fill up from the bottom to the top, and you use your arms, and then you release the breath, and the last thing to empty is the bottom of the bucket or the cup. And that's what your arms are mimicking. They're not just mimicking it, you're using your arms with the energy of your whole body and creating that kind of like the ball of energy that Kirby was creating with his hands. You could feel it because there is wavelength, there is substance to that motion. So once again, moving and closing your eyes. The other part of closing your eyes is, as you do this a little bit longer each time, you will start to see light inside your vision. So as your eyes are closed in a dark space, especially, you will start to see light happening, phosphine light. So you want to just notice it, and as you look at it, it wants to move, but it's actually more than like more light, and it often has color. Then you might be surprised to see it, but you can be aware of it, to start to be aware of it, and that's very special and part of Mr. School as well. I think that's all I have the energy to share with you. Hopefully that will help a little bit.